NFL season and break all their opponents. They will take the championship from the inept and give it back to you, the people of Oakland. The Raiders are the instrument of your liberation. I present to you the hosts of this radio show, Sean Wally and Sean Boyd.
Good evening, Raider Nation, and welcome to another episode of Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central. Hello once again, my name is Sean Boyd. You know who we are. Sean Wally, also known as the Double S Express, bringing to you Raiders insight, Raiders football, Raiders everything through and through. We've got one more week, and again, my co-host, Sean Wally. How you doing today, man?
Hey, what's going on, Sean, and happy Labor Day to everyone out there in Raider Nation.
Yes, a happy Labor Day, and for all of you who work and don't work, you know, we hope that you have an awesome Labor Day and enjoying the barbecue. Man, first things first, Mr. Wally. There was a football game this past week. The Oakland Raiders and the Seattle Seahawks.
There definitely was. Seems to be the annual meeting between the two teams in the preseason. Oakland always making the trip up to Seattle to end the preseason where jobs are won and lost. The starters are pretty much set. So really, second, third, and fourth string, can you make the team? Can you show the coaches what you need to make the team and be on an NFL squad?
And yes, you know, these are the things that we had talked about before. You know, the big question mark for the Oakland Raiders is how can the starters actually play against Seattle's first-string defense? The offense, how can they play against Seattle's first-string defense? Did we get the answer that we were looking for, Sean Wally?
Well, on defense, you know, the Raiders only gave up one touchdown, which has got to be a blessing in disguise at some point. One touchdown is, you know, something you can overcome as a team, whether it be special teams or on offense or, you know, maybe even a turnover with the defense. So if they can do that in week 1, week 2, and show some signs of progress, good things can happen.
Yeah, so, you know, it remains to be seen with the first week looming this Sunday. The Oakland Raiders are going into Indianapolis to take on the Indianapolis Colts. Andrew Luck and company. How do you think the Raiders will fare in this first week?
It's going to be a tough task against Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton and Reggie Wayne and the Indianapolis Colts. You know, these aren't the Indianapolis Colts of 5-10 years ago when it was the Peyton Manning show. We all know he's moved on to Denver, and now the Raiders get to see him twice a year. But Andrew Luck coming into his second year, and we'll see how he does. And, you know, the cards are stacked against the Raiders, but anything can happen on Sunday, and it's week 1, so everybody's even Steven at this point.
And speaking of even Steven and being at week 1, let's go out to the phone lines with our first guest on the Bonita Tequila Sports phone lines. We have Jon Lathbury from the Raiders Beat. Hey, John, how you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good, and welcome to Raider Nation Central on Pro Football Central. Thanks for coming on and spending the time with us. Hey, what is your intake here on the Oakland Raiders, how they've handled things in the preseason thus far?
Well, it's pretty obvious they haven't looked real good. I think defensively, anyone that was expecting them to come out was probably a little naive. Looks like they'll have 9 new starters. So there was definitely some growing pains to be expected. I do think their defense looks a little slower right now than last year. However, they made improvement last year. Dennis Allen, I have confidence in him as a defensive coach. I don't know where the pass rush is coming from, and I think that's a pretty popular topic right now. But yeah, I think once that group gets together, it may be decent, but right now I think they've been scored on 16 of 18 drives in the preseason, so it's obviously not good. So you got to look for a silver lining, I guess, for good news right about now.
Yeah, one of the things that that my co-host Sean Wale just mentioned is the defense actually making some strides as far as Seattle not getting more than one touchdown. One of the things that the Raiders were talking about is not being at full strength. When you look at the defensive line and you look at Vance Walker and Pat Sims, who didn't play until that fourth preseason game against Seattle, they showed a little bit of penetration through the offensive line of Seattle. Do you see that as being, a sign that that's going to be consistent in the future, or was that just one of those games?
Yeah, I mean, I liked Sims. I don't know if he's reliable. Walker, I liked him more. He didn't look as good the last week of preseason, but I mean, I have confidence that they can be decent. The whole defensive line as a group, I don't see a whole lot of consistency. I mean, hopefully someone steps up for them, but if there's optimism, I don't know where it's going to come from just yet. Not saying that it can't happen, but it hasn't shown up in preseason so far.
Jon Lathbury from RaidersBeat.com joining us here on Raider Nation Central Radio here on ProFootballCentral.com. And John, for there to be optimism, for good things to go the Raiders' way, how do you see that formula coming together? What has to happen for Raiders to have success early on in the NFL season?
Well, they need a little bit of energy. They need a spark, and I know that Coach Allen has talked about that, and I think it's pretty obvious that he's going to be looking to Terrell Pryor at some point soon for that. As far as success, we see it every year, kind of. Teams get hot, and it can happen. The Ravens last year in the playoffs, I don't think anyone thought they were going to make a run. The Cardinals start off hot. It can happen. It's a roster that's a little deficient on talent, but I don't feel like it's out of the question for them to come out strong against Indianapolis and impress. I just don't know right now where it's coming from, and if there's going to be a spark, it's going to probably have to come from the offense. And I know Darren McFadden has averaging somewhere around 3 yards a carry. He's not looked great so far. The offense as a whole hasn't looked great so far, but if there's going to be a spark, it's going to have to come from that unit, I think.
John, what's your take on how you said McFadden's having roughly 3 yards a carry? Is that more the fault of the offensive line or a combination of that plus McFadden maybe not hitting the hole the way he should? And on top of that, what do you make of Sean King's opinion of Darren McFadden?
I think I think McFadden is fine. He's looked fine to me. I have to say that since his injury in Kansas City 2 years ago, I haven't seen quite the explosive plays or the acceleration from him, but I don't know when he would have gotten an opportunity last year. There was one running lane, I think, that he had all year, so it would be nice for him to get an opportunity. Until that happens, I don't know. I didn't see him run away from too many people last year, so if he's not fine, they're in a little trouble. But what was the second part of your question there? Sean King's comment?
Correct.
Yeah, I don't see McFadden as a selfish player. For a guy that coming out of college had the reputation that he had, I think he's more than erased questions as far as that's concerned. He's been a good teammate by all accounts, so I don't believe that to be the case at all.
For those of you just tuning in, Jon Lathbury from RaidersBeat.com. Hey, John, there's no doubt about it that Darren McFadden in a contract year should have a banner year and come out and do some great things. You know, I believe that he'll, you know, if things go well with the offensive line, if he can get, you know, just an average line, he should have 1,000 yards rushing. Let's shift the gears a little bit, if we can, to the quarterback situation. That seems to be the big question in Raider Nation. Of course, Dennis Allen coming out today saying that he told both Flynn and Terrell Pryor who the starter was going to be, but he's not telling anybody else. What do you think who do you think is going to be the starting quarterback here for week 1?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that it'll be Terrell Pryor. I can't imagine any other choice at this point. I think, like the coach said, this team needs a spark. And even in Terrell Pryor's rough outings, in my mind, he's still passed the eye test. I know he's young. There's going to be mistakes, but I don't see any other option. I feel like Matt Flynn is a top-notch backup, a guy like him that can manage the game is someone that you would look for. However, I don't have the confidence in him over 16 games to take this team to anything special at all. I would kind of equate it to a NASCAR race, maybe throwing out a Honda Civic and guaranteeing yourself a spot at the finish line, because it's not going to break down, but you have no chance of winning. And over the long haul, I think Matt Flynn, 3 or 4 wins might be the ceiling on him. As much as I like the guy, I haven't heard much bad said about him. I just don't know if he has the tools at this point. And we don't know about Pryor, and maybe that's the best thing going for him right now. So.
Well, yeah, you'd mentioned there's not too much bad said about Matt Flynn, but one of the things that was said this past week by NFL Hall of Famer Warren Moon, and he said this in San Francisco on 95.7 The Game in San Francisco, he'd explained that Matt Flynn had a weak work ethic, or if you will. What do you think about that, those types of comments coming from a Hall of Fame quarterback in Warren Moon?
Well, I mean, I haven't seen him. I don't know how that can be explained. I know that he has always, in the past, when he was called on in Green Bay, a pretty tough situation against New England. He was more than prepared and stepped up. And he certainly didn't fall into an ideal situation, joining the team, I believe, in April, mixing a wedding in the middle there. So, with limited time to work with his wide receivers, this really was the recipe for a situation that wasn't ideal for Matt Flynn. So, and in that sense, I sympathize with him. I personally am fully confident that he can manage a team, but at this point for the Raiders, they need more than a game manager, if you ask me. So that's kind of my take on him. I haven't heard that from anyone other than Warren Moon, so I don't really have much to say about that.
Jon Lathbury joining us from RaidersBeat.com on the Bonita Tequila Hotline here on Raider Nation Central on the ProFootballCentral.com radio network. Sean Wally alongside Sean Boyd. And John, I don't know if you heard over the weekend, but as Tim Tebow was cut by the Patriots, NFL Network's Terrell Davis, of course, the great former Bronco running back, said that he would be an upgrade at the quarterback position in Oakland. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, he did beat Oakland once, so I don't think he would be an upgrade. I am a big fan of Tim Tebow, the person, the football player. I am pretty sure that he's a system guy. I don't see him working with any kind of conventional offense, but at this point, I'm not sure that Terrell Pryor would work in a conventional unconventional offense. So, no, I would not bring the media storm that would come with Tim Tebow, but I do like the guy, and no, I would not bring him to the Raiders, and I don't think we'll be seeing him there anytime soon.
Jon, if you could, you run RaidersBeat.com, and we've learned that you were on the East Coast in Delaware. When did you have this affinity for the Raiders, and when did you get your website rolling? And have you ever been out west, anywhere near the Oakland or LA area where the Raiders have had their home?
I have. I've written on and off for 5 or 6 years, followed them closely for much longer than that, and the website has been around for about 4 years. It's going through a couple of different names, but I've always owned it, so it's definitely a passion of mine. I enjoy keeping up with news and certainly have opinions on everything. So right now, it's a hobby, and I enjoy it, and that's pretty much it.
Jon Lathbury, RaidersBeat.com. Hey, Jon, just shifting gears again. We hadn't had a chance to talk with you about Reggie McKenzie and Mark Davis, that chemistry that is there or might not be there. Do you see the team developing in the near future, or is it something that's further down the line, maybe 2-3 years?
Well, I agree. I understand. I feel like I understand Reggie McKenzie's approach. He inherited a team that hadn't had success in quite a long time, and if I was in his position, I can't say that I wouldn't do the same thing. I understand why he revamped the entire roster. It's pretty obvious it's going to be a little more of a challenge than maybe even he expected. As far as signings that he's made, I'm sure he expected a little more out of some of his signings. He hit well, or he hit on Philip Wheeler, and it didn't stick. He didn't hang around, and I think if there was one guy that he would like to have back, it might be Wheeler, and I think that defense would probably look a little better with him right now, just the speed and the energy that he brought. But as far as McKenzie, the job he's doing, I do think it's too early to grade him. I do think that the situation with Tyler Wilson today, it doesn't look the best, but at the same time, I feel like too many times you hear about general managers not letting go of their own players and letting their ego get in the way. But it seems like in Reggie's case, when he does the opposite, he's a poor evaluator of talent. So to this point, his resume doesn't look great, and I feel for him for that. But he's going to have to hit on a couple guys soon, and if some of these early draft picks don't work out this year, I don't know what's in store, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's a big question mark is having his first full NFL draft, how these players will materialize. And you'd mentioned one thing as far as Tyler Wilson being put on to the practice program. I think that's actually a good move and not giving up on a young man so quickly, allowing him to actually learn the system instead of throwing him in, with the trial by fire. And maybe, Tyler will be something down the line. We just don't know, but you don't want to throw that type of talent away, especially when you used a 4th round pick on him. I want to ask you a question, Jon, as far as Mark Davis is concerned, and you being on the outside looking in, being on the East Coast in Delaware, there's always talk in Oakland or in the Raider Nation as far as the team not staying in Oakland. What do you think about that scenario? Do you think it'd be better for the Raiders to stay in Oakland or possibly look in another area, like maybe back to Los Angeles? What's your take on that?
Well, I don't know a whole lot, to tell you the truth. I know it's going to be difficult for them to stay there. I just don't think the money is there. Obviously, I don't know all the details, but I would say it seems like keeping the Raiders there and the amount of money that it'll take, it seems a little like putting a Lexus dealership in the bad part of town. I don't know how much business you're going to get. So the money that it would take to get the stadium in Oakland, I don't know that it's there. There's a lot of Fortune 500 companies elsewhere, particularly LA and in the South Bay. I don't know, but I know there's a lot more hurdles to stay in Oakland than there are to leave at this point. But at the same time, I do fully believe that Mark Davis, his goal is to keep them in Oakland. So we'll see. It'll play out. Next year, it's pretty obvious they're going to probably return to the Coliseum on some type of a one-year deal. So beyond that, I don't know.
John, do you think that Mark Davis is going to be patient enough, not only with Reggie McKenzie, but Dennis Allen and his coaching staff?
Probably not. I do not personally think. I think that if Reggie McKenzie isn't feeling the heat at this point, that he probably should. Do I think it's fair? Not necessarily. But I would hope that he would. I know that fans have lost patience to some degree, and maybe rightly so, but he's had one season. Football starts next week. Maybe wait a few games and see how the team looks and make some decisions then. But there's no such thing as a 3 or 4 year plan, in my opinion. You either win now or you're on the hot seat. So there is a formula for him to leave this year, in my opinion, and it involves a lot of losses. So we'll see how that plays out.
Jon Lathbury, RaidersBeat.com. We appreciate having you on the show. Hey, how can our listeners get a hold of you and be able to follow some of the things that you're doing?
Basically on Twitter, I am at RaidersBeat. That's about the best way to do it.
All right. And so RaidersBeat.com, they can catch all the information, find out a little bit about you, some of the things that you're writing about in the Raider Nation. So be sure to go online and check him out. Hey, John, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate you. Hey, any last words, prediction on the game this weekend?
A prediction? Oh, I would say, it's going to be a tough game for the Raiders. They're going to have to come together quickly. The Colts are a playoff football team at home. I don't think I see an outcome that's too positive. However, I do believe that in Darren McFadden and Terrell Pryor, if they can catch lightning in a bottle, who knows? So I guess that's why we tune in and watch, huh?
That's right. That's right.
Any given Sunday.
That's right.
Well, hey, John, thanks for being on the show. Again, if you wanted to catch any of what Jon Lathbury is doing with the Raider Nation, go to RaidersBeat.com. Again, John, thanks for being on, man, and we'll catch up with you down the road.
Thank you. Anytime.
Thanks a lot, John.
So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will have guest number 2 from the Indianapolis Colts. So keep it locked in here. You're listening to the best Raiders talk, Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central.
Football fans, check out the official T-shirt apparel shop for the Pro Football Central Radio Network. Check out bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati. You think it, we ink it. They have an awesome 24-hour turnaround time. You can also visit them at their fabulous store over at Anderson Town Center, 7426 Beachmont Avenue, Cincinnati, Ohio 45255. That's bigfrog.com/Cincinnati.
Football fans, looking to get healthy this year? Now is the time, and I have the perfect place for you. Save 10% at onit.com/football radio. Exclusive PFC radio listeners save 10% off their order. That's onnit.com, ONNIT.com/football radio.
Welcome back to Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central. We just had our first guest on from RaidersBeat.com, Jon Lathbury. Hey, Sean, Wally, great interview with Jon Lathbury.
Yeah, he had some good things to say about what's going on in Raider Nation, as what we can expect for the year. And like a lot of people think, it's going to be a tough one, going to be a few bumps along the way, but hopefully some things will break right, and you never know what can happen, and that's why they play the games. That's
right. And you had a question for him as pertaining Tim Tebow earlier. That was a shocker.
Yeah, and I was curious what your take, Sean Boyd, is on the fact that Terrell Davis of the NFL Network, the great former running back for the Broncos, said that Tebow would be an upgrade at the quarterback position in Oakland based on his experience and what he has done at the NFL level versus Pryor or Flynn.
Man, my response is a lot like John's. I have to giggle and laugh at that. Part of that is the Raiders' actually own doings, and not having success over recent years. So the Raiders seem to be like the butt of the joke as far as, hey, if you want to, get your career going, you can go into Oakland, and that seems to be the fit. I love Tim Tebow as a person. Actually, I really don't know him personally. I just know, some of the things that are what he stands for. I think he's a great guy and upstanding. But as far as him actually turning a team around, a franchise around, I think that's a little far-fetched. I think the Raiders need a little bit more than just at the quarterback position, and I've said this time and time again. But I wish Tim Tebow well. I just don't wish him well in the Raider Nation.
It'll be interesting to see where Tebow goes, if anywhere. A lot of people think he will end up nowhere, but let's get the opinion of the next guest here on Raider Nation Central Radio, heading out to the Bonita Tequila Hotline, and welcome in Nate Dunleavy from ColtsAuthority.com as the Raiders look to invade Indianapolis this coming Sunday.
Hey, gentlemen, how you doing tonight?
Good. Thanks for being on the show here, Nate, and taking the time out to talk on Raider Nation Central.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Hey, there's some great things that you've been doing in Indianapolis. Tell our listeners a little bit about yourself. I know you grew up in Indianapolis, currently presiding in Indianapolis, doing some great things as far as books are concerned. Go ahead and tell our listeners what you're about.
Sure. About 5 years ago, I founded a blog called 18to88.com, which focused mainly on the Colts. Since then, I've written 2 books, Blue Blood, The History of the Indianapolis Colts, as well as a novel about high school basketball in Indiana called Invincible Indiana. You can find all my books on MadisonHousePublishing.com. And right now I'm writing for a site called ColtsAuthority.com. I recently completed a stint covering the AFC South full-time for Bleacher Report, and now I'm writing on my own. And you can check out our Colts Annual. It's an amazing 100-page plus magazine. If you go to ColtsAuthority.com, you'll see a sidebar for the annual. If you're just interested in the NFL at all, this is a must download. Price is $4.99, and honestly, satisfaction's guaranteed. I promise you, even Raiders fans, if anyone does not absolutely enjoy and feel like they got their money's worth out of this magazine, I will personally refund that money. So people can hit me up at Nate Dunleavy, Dunlevy, on Twitter as well. So please feel free to check out my books or my writing on blogging.com or coltsauthority.com.
Man, that is an excellent plug, Mr. Dunleavy. Yeah, hopefully our listeners will definitely go out there and take a look at what's going on with your books and, of course, your website in coltsauthority.com. So tell us a little bit about the AFC South. You had mentioned that just a second ago.
Yeah.
The Indianapolis Colts, where are they going to fare?
It's a really good question. Indianapolis dramatically overachieved last year. They weren't nearly as good as their 11-win record would indicate. I think everybody knows by now this is a team that was outscored by 60 points on the season, which is usually a pretty good indicator of overall team strength. So really everything's going to come down to the play of Andrew Luck. If he can elevate himself to being one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the league, Indianapolis has a fighting chance of going back to the playoffs, possibly winning the division. They play in the worst division in football. The AFC South is terrible. All 4 teams are terrible. So Indianapolis has an outside chance of winning 9 games and slipping into the playoffs, only because the Houston Texans have really gone backwards. They probably won't win more than 9 games themselves. So it's not a very strong division. Indy will need every win they can get on the board, and best case, they eke out 9 wins or so and make the postseason.
That's an interesting take on the Houston Texans as far as what you're saying, them going backwards. I know that they have their full team intact, but I believe you're talking about maybe the injuries that have been going on in Houston.
Yeah, absolutely, injuries, but also I didn't like their offseason. I thought that losing the safety swap that they made, getting Ed Reed, I don't think that was a positive move at all for Houston. They're a team that's old. They're a team that's injury prone and is already loaded up on injuries. And honestly, they just weren't very good at the end of last season. This is a team that started out like a house of fire and completely collapsed down the stretch. And we're really humiliated several times in the final weeks of the season. I just don't think it's that good of a football team. At best, it's a 10-win team. And if the injury breaks don't go their way, as they haven't in recent years, then they're likely to win 9 games or fewer. I consider them one of the most overrated teams in the NFL right now. I just don't see a lot that I like going on there.
Nate Dunleavy from ColtsAuthority.com, kind enough to join us on the Bonita Tequila hotline here on Raider Nation Central Radio. And Nate, what do you think the departure of Bruce Arians to the Cardinals means for the Colts?
This is the $1 million question. Obviously, it's going to change Indianapolis's offense dramatically. Last year, when you watched the Colts, it was purely vertical. A lot of people that don't pay close attention will look at things like interception numbers or completion percentage for Andrew Luck and really wonder why he was so successful. But really, a lot of that had to do with the offense that Arians was running. No short routes. Everybody's flying 25 yards downfield. Luck was hit more than any other quarterback, in part because of that deep vertical offense. So now with Arians gone, Pep Hamilton comes in from Stanford, and he's going to have more of a West Coast, or they're calling it the no-coast offense. But you're going to see a lot more short routes. Luck's completion percentage is going to jump 10 points at minimum. I'd be shocked if he doesn't complete at least 65% of his passes this year. He's going to have a much better season statistically. But the real question is, will the Colts be the same team without the galvanizing force that was Chuck Pagano's illness last year? While Pagano was out, Arians did a great job leading the team, really kept everyone focused and in check, and now that's gone, and Pagano's here, and now he's going to have to coach. And we really still don't know if Chuck Pagano is a good in-game coach or not. He's a fantastic motivator, a really good teacher. You spend 5 minutes with the guy, and you really get his magnetism and why people love playing for him. But whether or not he can manage in-game, that's a skill set which he has yet to show. He just really was only on the sidelines for about 4 or 5 games last year, including the playoffs. So we don't know what kind of coach he's going to be in-game. But, without Bruce Arians around, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him to show that he really can coach this team back to the playoffs.
Guys, some breaking news from a good friend of the show, Vic Tafer from sfgate.com, Raiders beat writer, breaking that it's not a big shock, but they have learned that Terrell Pryor will start at quarterback on Sunday in the silver and black.
Man, well, there you have it. I mean, Terrell Pryor getting a chance to put his name on the map. I know that, what they're looking at is athleticism, and, which I believe is the reason why the Oakland Raiders would go in this route, because the offensive line is so beleaguered that you would need somebody to actually keep the play going. So, like you said, it's not really too much of a surprise, but at the same time, I mean, the Raider Nation could take a a big sigh and understanding and knowing what's going on and going into week one. So, Nate, what do you think of that? Terrell Pryor starting against the Indianapolis Colts this weekend.
No offense, guys, but Indianapolis is a very, very difficult place to make your first NFL start. That is a loud stadium. The fans are over the moon for this team. If you actually were to ask most Indianapolis fans, they think the Colts are potential Super Bowl contenders. I think that that's way too pie in the sky. I don't think they're nearly that good. But those are the expectations that come with the Indianapolis Colts. And so this crowd is going to be jacked way up. It's going to be an extremely loud stadium, very difficult environment. I don't see good things for Pryor this weekend. Indianapolis needs every winnable game they can get, and they have to. Honestly, I don't think if they can't beat the Raiders at home in opening week, I don't think that they're going to have a very strong season at all. So I would expect Indianapolis to really put a hurting to Pryor. Any defense is used to playing against an athletic, mobile quarterback. I mean, they see that all day long in training camp. Andrew Luck is extremely mobile. He's obviously a pass-first quarterback, but if he wanted to be a running quarterback, he could be. So I don't see Pryor's athleticism of being the normal kind of benefit that it would be to maybe a team that's not used to practicing against a guy that mobile. So I don't see that's going to be a big help for him this weekend. It could be a long afternoon in Indianapolis on Sunday.
Yeah, that definitely may be the case. Nate Dunleavy with ColtsAuthority.com. Hey, Nate, you had mentioned that the defense is going to be pinning their ears back, probably salivating to get after Terrell Pryor. The loss of Dwight Freeney in the offseason. Yeah. You have Corey Redding that's come in. Tell us the situation there as far as the defensive front, the defensive line. Have they replaced that prowess in Dwight Freeney?
Not even close. I mean, aside from the obvious, you don't replace a Dwight Freeney, one of the greatest players in franchise history, one of the great pass rushers in NFL history. Aside from the fact that just in general, a guy like that's difficult to replace, they haven't even come close. The guy that they signed predominantly to replace him is Eric Walden, who's really more of a run-playing running back, but anybody who remembers him playing for Green Bay against San Francisco last year mostly remembers seeing the back of his jersey as he chased Colin Kaepernick down the field. Very questionable signing. Indianapolis has shown no ability to rush the passer all preseason. Obviously, Robert Mathis hasn't really been going after it full steam in the preseason, so they still have Mathis, who's a very accomplished pass rusher in his own right. But first-round draft pick Jorn Werner from Florida State, it really is going to be a bit of a project. Indianapolis doesn't have a pass rush. I mean, so Pryor should have time to throw the football. I know during the preseason, it certainly looked like guys like Brandon Whedon had all day to throw. On the downside for Pryor, without that pass rush, he might not get very many opportunities to scramble. So he's going to have to sit in the pocket and complete passes almost by default because Indy won't be able to get to him fast enough. So he's going to have the opportunity to throw the ball downfield, and we're obviously going to see if that's a skill set that he possesses at the highest level.
Yeah, and that may be a blessing in disguise for the Indianapolis Colts, even though they don't need too many blessings. But, allowing Terrell Pryor to throw the ball will have a field frenzy for guys like LaRon Landry and Antoine Bethea, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. This is a reconstructed secondary in Indianapolis. Avonte Davis had a very up-and-down season last year after coming over from Miami in a trade. They picked up Greg Toller from the Arizona Cardinals, and it's sort of a swap of oft-injured cornerbacks between Gerard Powers and Toller. So nobody's actually really seen the whole secondary play together. Landry missed most of the preseason. So it's going to be interesting to see if this completely rebuilt secondary, which was possibly the worst in football, second worst maybe behind New Orleans last year. They got a long way to go. There's some talented players, some players guys have heard of, but whether or not they're really frontline secondary, we'll see. They're not very deep at all. You get into guys like Cassius Vaughn and Darius Butler, who can be interesting role players, but should anything happen to the frontline guys, the Indy secondary could be in trouble. So it's going to be a real challenge for the Indy secondary to try to hold down receivers for most passing attacks, but I think Pryor will be a nice warm-up for them.
Nate Dunleavy from ColtsAuthority.com, kind enough to take time out of his Labor Day to join us here on Raider Nation Central Radio. Nate, If you could forecast a way that the Raiders can have success on Sunday, what would that be?
Number one, you have to pressure Andrew Luck. You have to hit him constantly. The Indy offensive line is terrible. They cannot run the ball at all. This is a one-dimensional passing team. They have great tight ends, good wide receivers, no running game. So you have to absolutely force Luck into loss of third and longs and then hit him and try to hold the offense under 20 points. And then defensively, you can run the ball on Indianapolis. You ought to be able to pass the ball in Indianapolis if you have a competent passing attack. So what you're really looking for is to exploit major Indianapolis weaknesses in special teams and then throw a couple long bombs on them and then try to grind out the clock and keep the ball away from Andrew Luck. If Andrew Luck has a good day passing, you're simply not going to beat Indianapolis. He's too good.
Now, Nate, final two questions for you. What is your prediction for Sunday's game at Lucas Oil Stadium? And then secondly, have you been on that zip line out in front of the stadium?
I haven't been on the zip line. It's not there anymore. They took it down after the Super Bowl. So that whole week that it was up was insane. It was really a long wait. So no, I didn't get to do the zip line. I did go to the Super Bowl, but I didn't do any zip lining. And as far as my prediction for this weekend, I'm going to go Indianapolis 24, Oakland 13.
Man, that is great analysis from Nate Dunleavy. Hey, Nate, thanks for being on the show. And again, can you tell the listeners again how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. They can find me on Twitter at Nate Dunleavy, Dunlevy. They can find my work at ColtsAuthority.com. They can find my books at MadisonHousePublishing.com. And both on Colts Authority and on Madison House, they'll find links to the Colts Authority Annual. If you're interested in getting the lowdown on the Colts, just as get to know your rival kind of thing, trust me, you'll be glad you spent the $5 to get that annual. The magazine is incredible and it's beautiful. Funny stuff, insightful stuff, lots of stats, numbers, breakdowns of the whole AFC South. So you guys are going to be playing all the AFC South teams. You want to get the inside scoop on those guys, check out the annual, and it'll serve you well all year long.
Author, beat writer, and information extraordinaire, Nate Dunleavy. Hey, man, thanks for being on the show. And, after this weekend, tremendous success to the Indianapolis Colts and everything that you do, man.
Thanks, brothers. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
Football fans, check out ProFootballCentral.com for all the latest NFL news and analysis. Also, check out the very popular Pro Football Central radio network for awesome NFL talk around the league. Go to ProFootballCentral.com. ProFootballCentral.com.
Welcome back to Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central. We've had an interesting and an awesome show thus far, Mr. Wally. We've had Jon Lathbury, beat writer for RaidersBeat.com, and then we just had on Nate Dunleavy from ColtsAuthority.com. Excellent show, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it was great for both John and Nate to join us via the Bonita Tequila hotline, and they had great information on not only the Raiders, but the Raiders' opponent, the Colts, on Sunday.
Yeah, that's going to be a great game for those of you, for all the Raider Nation fans. First game of the season, clean slate, 0-0. There's no other way to start the season than to start out with the likes of Andrew Luck and a very strong defense in the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, it's going to take, some mistakes by the Colts for the Raiders to get that edge and to, they're going to have to get on top early, via a special teams kick or punt return, maybe a turnover on the Colts side to where the Raiders can get some momentum, have some good things go their way, and see where the chips may fall.
Man, you are almost talking in lines of the team that the Raiders just played in the fourth preseason game, the Seattle Seahawks, the type of team that has a recipe for success this year, and that's through takeaways and just trying to put as much pressure on as possible.
Yeah, and no matter what team you are, whoever does that typically is going to win the football game. So if the Raiders can find a way to get a couple takeaways and hand Run DMC the ball and let him do his work, get him back to his 2011 form, we could see a bit of a surprise in Indy.
Yeah, there's some things some huge question marks, as we've always talked about. And for one, can the Raiders get defensive pressure? Can they, put pressure on Andrew Luck? Can they cause a disturbance and not allow the secondary to actually play true defense and for 3-4 seconds at a time? Will Terrell Pryor come out there and actually have a good first game? I mean, what is a good game, do you think, for Terrell Pryor?
Well, mistake-free is always the key. I would hate to say that he has to have no interceptions, but for the Raiders to win, I think that is the case. You can't shoot yourself in the foot and be able to overcome all of that with, Pryor getting his first NFL start, as Vic Tafur reported earlier. And, it's going to be a battle, and, the Raiders have to have some things go their way and the ball bounce their way to have an upset in Indy.
Man, when you mention the word bounce, I hope it doesn't come from the receivers side of the ball. I mean, you have Rod Streeter that's supposed to, he had a great year last year. Hopefully he can have a good year this year. Jerron Kreiner, Denarius Moore, it remains to be seen. I know the game against Seattle, the receivers had cases of the drops. I mean, goodness gracious, if they could just catch the ball, that would be half the battle, wouldn't you think?
Absolutely. That's their job. That's what they're paid to do. And these guys are professionals, and this is the NFL. So definitely have some good hands, catch the ball, and good things can happen. Move those chains. And Nate Dunleavy from ColtsAuthority.com can be heard Thursday nights here on the ProFootballCentral.com radio network on Colts Central Radio. And Raider Nation, you might want to tune into that to get more in depth on the Colts' upcoming opponent here for the Raiders this weekend.
Definitely. And so, of course, we have that big game this weekend, week number 1, Raider Nation. You can catch that game on CBS, 10 a.m. start on the West Coast. And so that will conclude for us. For Brian Harrington, our technician, and also for Sean Wally, my co-host, I'm Sean Boyd, the Double S Express. You've been listening to Raider Nation Central Radio on Pro Football Central. See you next week.
This has been a presentation of the Pro Football Central Network. For news, blogs, highlights, and more, log on to ProFootballCentral.com.